The scent of wet earth filled my lungs as I knelt by the river's edge. Autumn had painted the forest in fiery hues, yet the cold that seeped through my thin clothes reminded me that winter approached with merciless intent. Droplets from last night's rain still clung to pine needles, occasionally falling to create ripples across the water's surface. This river had always been my sanctuary, the one place where being alone felt like a choice rather than a punishment. Behind me, the distant sounds of the pack's harvest festival filtered through the trees. Laughter, singing, the rhythmic beating of drums. Tonight marked the final celebration before winter, when my pack would gather to share food, stories, and strengthen bonds. Everyone had a place at the festival, everyone except me. "You don't belong there anyway, Ilara," I whispered to myself, fingers tracing patterns in the muddy shoreline. My status as an Omega, the lowest rank in werewolf hierarchy, had always set me apart, but it was my inability to shift fully into wolf form that had sealed my fate as an outcast. A defective werewolf, they called me. A half-shift, someone whose transformation stopped at elongated canines, sharpened nails, and eyes that glowed amber in the dark. Never a complete wolf. My grandmother's pendant hung heavy around my neck, a simple silver crescent moon on a leather cord. The moon embraces all her children, even those who cannot reach her, she had told me before she died, pressing the necklace into my palm. "Your strength lies elsewhere, little one." I touched it now, drawing comfort from the cool metal, wondering if she had known how alone I would become. A sudden splash downstream broke my melancholy thoughts. At first, I dismissed it as a fish jumping or a water bird diving. But then came a sound that froze my blood. A pained whimper followed by labored breathing. Something large was struggling in the water. I moved cautiously along the shoreline, heart pounding against my ribs. 20 yards downstream, half submerged in the shallows, lay a massive wolf. Its silver-gray fur was matted with blood, its powerful body trembling with exhaustion. One of its hind legs was bent at an unnatural angle, and a deep gash ran along its side, turning the water around it crimson. I hesitated, every instinct screaming for me to run. This was not one of our pack wolves. It was too large, its scent unfamiliar, and marked by something I couldn't quite identify. Power. Ancient and undiluted. But beneath that, pain and vulnerability called to something deep within me. "Hey," I whispered, approaching slowly with my hands visible. "I won't hurt you." The wolf's head snapped up, and I found myself staring into eyes the color of midnight, not the amber or gold typical of werewolves. A growl rumbled from its chest, but it lacked strength. This creature was dying. Without further hesitation, I waded into the frigid water. The wolf attempted to snap at me, but weakness prevented it from doing more than bare its teeth. I know. You're scary and powerful," I murmured, trying to keep my voice calm despite my racing heart. "But you'll die if you stay here, and I can't let that happen." Somehow I managed to drag the massive creature to shore. It must have weighed twice what I did, and by the time we reached dry land, my muscles screamed in protest, my clothes were soaked through, and the wolf had fallen unconscious. Up close, its injuries looked even worse. The gash was deep enough to expose muscle, and silver particles glinted within the wound. Silver. The only substance truly toxic to our kind. "Who did this to you?" I whispered, gently touching the fur around its face. Even wounded and unconscious, the wolf radiated a majesty I had never encountered before. Night was falling rapidly, and the temperature with it. I couldn't leave him here, but I couldn't bring him back to the pack either. Our alpha, Nathaniel, tolerated no wolves from outside our borders, especially not males who might challenge his authority. And this wolf, despite its current state, was clearly powerful. My small cabin stood about a mile upstream, hidden in a thicket of pines far enough from the main pack territory to afford me privacy. It was my father's final gift to me before he died, a place where my difference wouldn't matter quite so much. Just my luck, I sighed, gathering what strength remained in my tired body. Of all the wolves and all the rivers and all the world, I had to find the biggest, heaviest one. Done, I fashioned a crude travois from fallen branches and my jacket, then somehow managed to roll the unconscious wolf onto it. Each step toward my cabin felt like walking through deep mud, my muscles burning with the effort of dragging such weight. but something inside me refused to give up. The same stubborn spark that had kept me going all these years on the fringes of pack life. By the time my cabin came into view, sweat plastered my hair to my forehead despite the cold, and my breaths came in short, painful gasps. The last few yards were the worst, but finally I managed to drag the wolf through my door and onto the rug before my small fireplace. The cabin was simple. One room with a bed against one wall, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and the fireplace that provided heat during winter. Herbs hung from the ceiling beams, filling the air with earthy scents. My grandmother had taught me about healing plants before she passed, and it was one of the few services the pack still sought from me. I built up the fire, then gathered my supplies, clean cloths, hot water, a jar of healing salve made from comfrey and yarrow, and bandages. The wolf remained unconscious as I cleaned its wounds, carefully removing the silver particles embedded in the gash. Each time I extracted a piece, the surrounding tissue seemed to relax, as if finally able to begin healing. Setting the broken leg would be more difficult. I had helped our pack healer with similar injuries before, but never on a wolf this size. I prepared splints and more bandages, then positioned myself at the wolf's hindquarters. "This is going to hurt," I warned, though I doubted the unconscious creature could hear me. "I'm sorry." With a quick motion, I pulled and twisted, feeling the bones align with a sickening crunch. The wolf jerked awake with a howl that shook the cabin walls. Those midnight eyes locked onto mine, filled with pain and fury. Before I could move, it lunged. I found myself pinned to the floor, the wolf's massive paws on my shoulders, its teeth bared inches from my face. My heart thundered so loudly I was certain the wolf could hear it. We stayed like that for what felt like eternity, its hot breath against my skin, my body frozen in terror. Then something unexpected happened. The wolf's form shimmered, the outline blurring like heat rising from summer stones. Fur receded, limbs elongated, and where the massive wolf had been, a man now held me down, a naked man with midnight eyes and silver-streaked black hair. The wound on his side still bled, and his leg remained at a slightly unnatural angle despite my setting it, but there was no mistaking the aura of power that radiated from him. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice deep and rough, as if he hadn't used it in some time. "What pack?" I couldn't speak, shocked by the transformation. Most werewolves needed time to shift, especially when injured. This man had done it in seconds. His hand closed around my throat, not tight enough to cut off air, but certainly enough to threaten. "Answer me. Now." "Alara," I managed to whisper. "Northern Pine Pack." His eyes narrowed. "You're lying. I know every wolf in Northern Pine. You're not one of them." "I am," I insisted, finding my voice. "Just not one they acknowledge. I can't shift fully. I'm the Omega." Understanding flashed in his eyes, followed by something that looked almost like pity. His grip loosened, but he didn't move away. "You pulled me from the river?" I nodded. "Why?" The question confused me. "Because you were dying." He studied me with those unnerving eyes, as if trying to see beyond my words to the truth beneath them. Whatever he found seemed to satisfy him, because he finally rolled away, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. "You shouldn't move," I said, sitting up and trying to regain my composure. "I just set that leg and the silver poisoning." "I know what silver does," he cut me off. "I need clothes and food. Then you're going to tell me exactly where we are and how far to the eastern border." I stood shakily, keeping my distance as I moved to a trunk where I kept some of my father's old clothes. They would be too small for this stranger, but better than nothing. I tossed him a pair of pants and a shirt, then busied myself at the stove, heating a pot of stew I'd made earlier. "The eastern border is about 40 miles from here," I said, my back to him as I heard him dressing. "But you won't make it 10 in your condition." "You don't know my condition." I turned to face him, finding him dressed in my father's clothes, which strained against his broader frame. "I know silver when I see it, and I know a broken bone needs time to heal, even for our kind." "Our kind," he repeated with a harsh laugh. We are not the same kind, little Omega. The words stung, familiar in their dismissal. I'd heard variations of them all my life. Lifting my chin, I met his gaze directly. No, we're not. I would have died in that river. You nearly did. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that I would speak to him so boldly. Then his legs buckled, and he grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. Pride kept him upright, but I could see the cost in the sheen of sweat on his forehead. Sit before you fall, I said, gesturing to the chair. The food is almost ready. Surprisingly, he obeyed, lowering himself carefully into the chair. His eyes never left me as I moved around the small space, gathering bowls and spoons, pouring water from my pitcher into cups. When I placed a steaming bowl before him, he inhaled deeply before asking, "How do I know you haven't poisoned this?" I met his gaze steadily. "If I wanted you dead, I would have left you in the river." He held my eyes for another long moment, then nodded once and began to eat. I sat across from him with my own bowl, watching as he devoured the simple stew as if it were a feast. "You have questions," he said between mouthfuls. "Ask them." I had dozens, but settled on the most pressing. "Who are you?" "Someone you should fear." "That's not an answer." His lips curved slightly. "No, it's not. But it's all you get for now." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters and carrying with it the distant howls of wolves. My pack, continuing their festival under the rising moon. The stranger tilted his head, listening intently to the sounds. "You're Alpha," he said finally. "It's still Nathaniel?" I nodded, surprised. "You know him?" "I know of him." Something dark crossed his features. "Tell me, little Omega, how does he treat his pack?" The question made me uncomfortable. Pack loyalty ran deep, even for someone on the fringes like me. But there was something in those midnight eyes that compelled honesty. "He's strong," I said carefully. "He keeps us safe." That wasn't what I asked. I looked down at my half-eaten stew. "He takes what he wants. Those who question him don't question anything again." The stranger nodded, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. He pushed his empty bowl away and attempted to stand, only to stagger as his injured leg gave way beneath him. I rushed forward without thinking, catching his weight against me. He was burning hot, his skin radiating fever. "Silver poisoning," I said, helping him toward my bed. "You need to rest and let the herbs work." "I don't have time for this," he growled, but allowed me to lower him onto the mattress. "Make time," I retorted, surprising myself with my boldness. "Or make funeral arrangements." A startled laugh escaped him before he winced in pain. Those midnight eyes studied me with new interest. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Ilara of Northern Pine." "I've been told it's the latter," I admitted, pulling a blanket over him. "Sleep now. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." I turned to move away, but his hand shot out, fingers circling my wrist with surprising gentleness. "Why did you help me?" "The truth." I could have given him many answers. Compassion, duty, basic decency. But looking into those fathomless eyes, only the raw truth would do. "Because I know what it's like when no one stops to help you," I said softly. "And I wouldn't wish that loneliness on anyone, not even someone I should fear." He held my gaze for a long moment, then released my wrist. As I moved to make a pallet for myself by the fire, his voice followed me, quieter now and tinged with something I couldn't quite identify. "My name is Rowan. Just that. No pack name, no title. But something told me it was a gift all the same. Perhaps the first truthful thing he'd shared." "Rest well, Rowan," I replied, settling onto my makeshift bed. As the fire burned low and the stranger's breathing deepened with sleep, I touched the crescent pendant at my throat and wondered what force had guided me to the river today, and what consequence this rescue would bring. One thing was certain. My life had changed irrevocably the moment I dragged this wounded wolf from the water. I woke to sunlight filtering through my small window and the unsettling awareness of another presence in my cabin. For a moment, disorientation gripped me, then memories of the previous evening came rushing back. The wounded wolf, The river. The man with midnight eyes who called himself Rowan. Sitting up from my pallet by the now cold fireplace, I glanced toward my bed, empty. Panic fluttered in my chest as I scrambled to my feet, eyes darting around the cabin. Had he left? In his condition, he wouldn't make it far before the door creaked open, and Rowan stepped inside, moving with a pronounced limp but significantly steadier than the night before. He carried an armful of firewood, which he deposited beside the hearth with a soft grunt of pain. "You're up," he observed, straightening carefully. "Good. We need to talk." In daylight, I could better assess my unexpected guest. Tall and broad-shouldered, he filled the small cabin with his presence. The silver streaks in his black hair didn't age him, but instead lent him an air of authority. His face was all angles and planes, high cheekbones, strong jaw, straight nose. But it was those eyes that captured attention. So dark they appeared black until light caught them just right, revealing deep blue depths. My father's clothes strained against his frame, the shirt pulling tight across his chest and the pants ending well above his ankles. Despite this and his evident pain, he projected an aura of command that made my small home feel even smaller. "You shouldn't be walking on that leg," I said, finding my voice. "The bone needs time to—" "I heal quickly," he interrupted, though the tightness around his eyes belied his casual tone. "Your herbs helped." I moved to the stove, needing something to do with my hands. "I'll make tea, and you should let me check your wounds. Later." He lowered himself into one of my chairs, eyes following my movements. "Tell me about your pack first. How many?" The question made me uncomfortable. Pack information wasn't shared lightly, especially not with strangers who appeared from nowhere with unexplained injuries. I busied myself filling the kettle. "Ilara." Something in his tone made me turn. He wasn't asking anymore. "How many in your pack?" "About 60, I answered reluctantly. "Why does it matter?" "Warriors?" "Maybe 20. Again, why?" He ignored my question. "And Nathaniel? He has a second?" "Gregory," I said, setting the kettle on the stove. "His cousin." Rowan nodded, absorbing this information with an intensity that sent unease rippling through me. What did he want with my pack? Injured as he was, he couldn't be planning anything threatening, but his interest felt too pointed to be casual. "Your turn," I said firmly. "Who are you, really? What happened to you?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Direct. I like that." The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. "I'm from the Eastern Territories, beyond the Great Lake." The Eastern Territories, lands so distant they existed more as legend than reality to most of my pack. Whispers spoke of powerful shifters there, organized under a single ruler rather than the loose confederation of pack alphas that governed our western regions. "The Alpha King," I whispered, pieces suddenly clicking into place. The unusual power I'd sensed, the midnight eyes, the way he'd shifted while gravely injured, his expression revealed nothing. "You've heard the term." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "Stories, tales around the fire. They say the Eastern Wolves united under a single bloodline centuries ago, that their king is more wolf than man, with powers beyond ordinary shifters. Tales grow in the telling," he said dismissively, but didn't deny it outright. The kettle began to whistle. I removed it from the heat, my mind racing with implications. If Rowan was from the Eastern Territories, possibly even connected to their ruling hierarchy, what was he doing here, hundreds of miles from home? "The silver in your wounds," I said, pouring hot water over dried herbs. "Someone hunted you deliberately." His jaw tightened. "Yes. Hunters. Humans who knew about our kind and sought to destroy us were rare these days, but not unheard of." "No." Something dark flashed across his features. "My kind." I placed a steaming mug before him, then sat across the table with my own. Why would werewolves use silver against one of their own? He curled his fingers around the mug, but didn't drink. "Politics," he said with a bitter twist of his lips. "Power. The usual reasons anyone seeks to eliminate a rival." A chill ran through me. This was dangerous territory. Whatever conflict had brought Rowan to our lands, it wasn't something alone Omega should become entangled with. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. "Trouble recognizes no boundaries, little one. It will find you whether you invite it or not. You need to leave, I said abruptly. As soon as you're strong enough, whatever battle you're fighting, don't bring it here. Rowan studied me over the rim of his mug as he finally took a sip. Afraid for your pack? Or for yourself? Both, I admitted. Nathaniel doesn't tolerate outside wolves in our territory. If he finds you here... I'm not concerned about Nathaniel. You should be, I insisted. Whatever you are in the east, this is his territory. A dangerous glint appeared in Rowan's eyes. And what exactly am I in the east, Alara? Since you seem to have theories. I hesitated, aware I was treading on unstable ground. I don't know. Someone important enough that others would risk using silver to kill you. He set down his mug, finished checking my wounds. I need to know how soon I can travel. The abrupt change of subject told me I'd veered too close to something he wasn't ready to discuss. I nodded and moved to gather my supplies. When I returned, he had removed my father's shirt, exposing his torso. I sucked in a breath. The gash along his side had already begun to heal, far more rapidly than should be possible, even for a werewolf. Where last night the wound had been raw and deep, now it was sealed, a red line marking what would soon be just another scar among the many that already mapped his skin. How? I breathed, fingers hovering above but not quite touching. I told you, I heal quickly. More than quickly. Supernaturally. I'd never seen anything like it. Pushing aside my amazement, I gently examined the healing wound, checking for any remaining signs of silver poisoning. Finding none, I moved to his leg. The break had also improved dramatically overnight. When I carefully probed the area, he didn't even flinch. Another day, maybe 2, I concluded. Then you should be able to travel without risking further damage. He nodded, pulling the shirt back on. 2 days. Then I leave. Relief and, strangely, a twinge of disappointment mingled within me. 2 days was nothing. Just enough time for him to regain strength before disappearing from my life, as suddenly as he'd entered it. What will you do? I asked before I could stop myself. When you leave here? Something guarded settled over his features. Better you don't know. Because it's dangerous? Because knowledge has consequences, he said quietly. And you've already taken enough risk by helping me. A sharp knock on the door froze us both. My heart leapt into my throat as a familiar voice called out. Ilara, are you there? It's Maya. Rowan tensed, eyes darting to the door, then back to me. A silent question passed between us. I nodded toward the small back room where I stored herbs and supplies, the only possible hiding place in the cabin. As he slipped silently into the storeroom, I smoothed my rumpled clothes and hair before opening the door to greet Maya, one of the few pack members who still sought my company. Sorry to disturb you, she said, her pretty face pinched with worry. But Gregory is organizing search parties, and I thought you should know. Search parties? My voice sounded strained even to my own ears. What happened? Maya glanced over her shoulder, then lowered her voice. Sentries reported unknown wolf tracks along the eastern boundary last night. Large ones. And they found blood by the river, a lot of it. Nathaniel is furious. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would they search here? I'm miles from the eastern border. They're searching everywhere, Maya explained. Gregory thinks the intruder might be injured and hiding within our territory. And... She hesitated. And what? And Nathaniel specifically said to check outlying dwellings, places where someone might shelter an outsider without the pack knowing. The implication was clear. As an Omega who lived apart from the main pack, I was automatically suspect. I forced a calm I didn't feel into my voice. When will they reach this area? By nightfall, probably. They started from the eastern boundary and are working their way inward. Maya touched my arm gently. I just wanted to warn you. Keep your head down, okay? Nathaniel's in one of his moods. I nodded, thanking her with as much sincerity as I could muster. After she departed, I closed the door and leaned against it, trying to slow my racing heart. Your friend is right to be concerned. Rowan's voice came from behind me. He had emerged from the storeroom, his expression grim. Nathaniel's moods are legendary. "You need to be gone before they arrive," I said, pushing away from the door. "Tonight is too soon for your leg, but I'm not leaving you to face them alone," he interrupted, surprising me. "Not when sheltering me is what put you in danger." "I'll be fine," I insisted, even as doubt gnawed at me. "I'm used to Nathaniel's suspicion." Rowan stepped closer, studying my face. "Has he hurt you before? Your alpha?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. Memories flashed through my mind. Nathaniel's casual cruelty, the times he'd made examples of those who displeased him, how he particularly seemed to enjoy demonstrating my place at the bottom of pack hierarchy. "Not physically," I answered carefully. "Not often." Something dangerous flared in Rowan's eyes. "Often enough." I looked away. "It doesn't matter." "What matters is getting you away from here safely." "It matters," he said, his voice low and controlled in a way that somehow conveyed more anger than shouting would have. "An alpha protects all pack members, even the Omega." "Maybe in the East," I replied with a bitter smile. "Things work differently here." His hand came up, surprisingly gentle as he turned my face back toward his. "They shouldn't." For a moment we stood like that, his fingers warm against my skin, his midnight eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Then he dropped his hand and stepped back. "We have until nightfall," he said, all business again. "That gives us time to prepare." "Prepare for what?" "You can't fight an entire pack." A smile curved his lips, cold and dangerous. "I don't need to fight the entire pack. Just the one who leads it." "You can't be serious," I said, staring at Rowan in disbelief. "Challenge Nathaniel? In your condition?" "I've fought in worse states," he replied, moving to the window to peer out at the forest beyond. "And I won't let you suffer for helping me." "This isn't about me," I insisted, though his concern warmed something long cold within me. "This is about survival, yours and mine. If you challenge Nathaniel on his territory, with his warriors around him, neither of us will see morning." Rowan turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You underestimate me, and you underestimate him. Nathaniel may be cruel, but he's strong. He's held power for 12 years by eliminating anyone who threatened his position." 12 years, Rowan repeated, something calculating in his gaze. "A long time for a tyrant." I moved to my small kitchen area, needing distance from both Rowan and the dangerous ideas he was contemplating. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching dust motes and golden beams that belied the tension filling my cabin. Outside, birds called to one another, oblivious to the human and werewolf politics unfolding beneath their trees. "There's another option," I said finally, turning back to him. "The old tunnels." His head tilted slightly. "Tunnels?" "From the mining days before the humans abandoned this region. They run beneath the northern ridge, eventually leading beyond pack territory. They're dangerous. Parts have collapsed, but they're unmapped and Nathaniel's search parties won't check them." Rowan considered this, his fingers drumming lightly against my windowsill. "You know these tunnels well?" "Well enough. My father showed me when I was young." He said... I hesitated, the memory bittersweet. "He said I might need an escape route someday." Something softened in Rowan's expression. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," I agreed quietly. "Nathaniel killed him 5 years ago for questioning pack leadership." The words hung in the air between us. I hadn't meant to share that truth. It wasn't something I spoke of, even to myself. But something about Rowan pulled honesty from me like water from a deep well. "I see," he said, and in those 2 simple words I heard genuine understanding. "All the more reason I should stay and face him." "No," I shook my head firmly. "All the more reason you should leave." My father died hoping I would find a life beyond Nathaniel's cruelty. I won't dishonor that by risking what little safety I've managed to carve out here. Rowan crossed the room with that predator's grace all werewolves possessed, even injured ones. He stopped before me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "And what kind of safety is it, Alara?" living alone, avoiding the pack you were born to, waiting for the day Nathaniel's mood turns against you with no one to stand in his way. His words struck at truths I'd been avoiding for years, the fragility of my existence, the knowledge that my relative peace depended entirely on Nathaniel's disinterest in me. "It's the only safety I've known," I whispered. Rowan's hand came up, hesitating a moment before gently pushing a strand of pale hair behind my ear. The simple gesture carried a tenderness that made my throat tight. "There are other kinds," he said softly. For a heartbeat, I allowed myself to imagine it, a life where I didn't have to hide or diminish myself, where pack meant protection rather than persecution, where someone like Rowan looked at me with that same gentle intensity he showed now. Then reality reasserted itself. I stepped back, breaking the spell. "We should gather supplies," I said briskly. "If we leave by midday, we can reach the tunnel entrance well before Nathaniel's search parties make it this far." Something flickered in Rowan's eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. Then he nodded, once again all business. "Tell me what we need." The next few hours passed in efficient preparation. I packed a small bag with essentials: dried meat and fruit, a water skin, bandages, matches, my few precious healing herbs. Rowan tested his injured leg, finding it stronger but still not fully healed. The limp remained pronounced, but he could move quickly when needed, which would have to be enough. As midday approached, I stood in the center of my small cabin, looking around at the only true home I'd known since my father's death. The herbs hanging from rafters, the worn but comfortable furniture, the little touches that made the space mine. A shelf of treasured books, a quilt my grandmother had made, sketches of plants pinned to the walls. "I might never see it again. We can find another way," Rowan said quietly from behind me, reading my thoughts. "If you're not ready to leave," I shook my head, fingers automatically finding my grandmother's pendant. "I've been ready for years, just waiting for the right reason." I turned to face him. "I just never thought it would come in the form of a half-drowned wolf in my river." A smile touched his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "Life rarely delivers what we expect." "No," I agreed, returning his smile with a small one of my own. "It doesn't." We left the cabin under the midday sun, staying to the deepest parts of the forest where shadows would hide our passage. Rowan moved with surprising grace despite his injury, and I found myself struggling to match his pace as we headed north toward the ridge that marked the edge of Packlands. "You never told me how you ended up in the river," I said after we'd been walking for nearly an hour, partly from curiosity and partly to distract myself from the growing ache in my legs, or why you were in our territory at all. Rowan was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, as if carefully choosing each word. "There's unrest in the Eastern Territories, challenges to the established order. I was investigating rumors that some of the dissidents had fled west, seeking alliances with packs here." "Alliances for what?" His jaw tightened. "War." The word fell between us like a stone. Werewolf wars were the stuff of history books and elders' tales, bloody, devastating conflicts that had nearly exposed our kind to humans centuries ago. The peace between territories was old and largely unquestioned. "That doesn't explain the silver," I pressed, "or why you were alone." "I wasn't alone," he said, his voice dropping. "My party was ambushed 3 days ago, near the Great Lake. Silver-tipped arrows, professional hunters, but wolves guided them." "Your own people," I breathed, horrified. "Working with human hunters? Some wolves will make bargains with anyone for the right price or promise of power." Bitterness edged his tone. "I escaped, but took an arrow. Made it as far as your territory before the river claimed me." "And the others in your party?" His silence told me everything. "I'm sorry," I said softly. He acknowledged this with a slight nod, then abruptly stopped walking, his head tilted in the alert posture all werewolves recognized. Listening. I froze beside him, straining my own less sensitive ears. For a moment, I heard nothing but the usual forest sounds: wind in branches, distant birdsong, the scurrying of small creatures through underbrush. Then, carried on the breeze, came the unmistakable sound of wolves moving through forest, multiple sets of paws hitting earth in a coordinated rhythm. "The search parties," I whispered. They're earlier than Maya thought. Rowan's expression hardened. How much further to the tunnels? Another hour, at least. I glanced anxiously in the direction of the sounds. They're coming from the east, moving west. If we continue north, we might avoid them. He nodded, and we set off again, moving faster now. The forest grew denser as we approached the ridge, the ground steeper and rockier. Rowan's limp became more pronounced, though he made no complaint. When he stumbled slightly on a loose stone, I instinctively reached for his arm to steady him. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, a rush of warmth that had nothing to do with exertion, and everything to do with the feel of solid muscle beneath my palm. He paused, those midnight eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. For a heartbeat, the forest around us seemed to fade. There was only Rowan's gaze holding mine, his arm warm beneath my hand. The subtle shift in his scent that told me he'd felt that same jolt. Then a howl cut through the air, much closer than before, breaking the moment. "They've picked up our trail," Rowan said grimly, pulling away from my touch. "We need to move faster." Fear lent speed to my tired legs as we half ran, half climbed up the increasingly steep terrain. The ridge loomed above us, its rocky face interspersed with scraggly trees and brush that offered minimal cover. The tunnel entrance lay just below the ridge's crest, hidden behind a fallen pine that had been there since my father's time. Another howl sounded, this one answered by several others from different directions. They were coordinating, surrounding us. Panic clawed at my throat. "We won't make it," I gasped, lungs burning from the effort. "They're closing in too quickly." Rowan stopped abruptly, turning to me with decision written across his features. "Go. Get to the tunnel. I'll lead them away." "What?" "No," I grabbed his arm again. "You can't outrun them, not with your leg. And if they catch you, they won't," he said with a confidence I couldn't share. "But you need time to reach safety." "I'm not leaving you," I insisted, surprising myself with the fierceness in my voice. "We go together or not at all." Something sparked in his eyes, surprise, and perhaps a grudging respect. "Stubbornness won't save us, little Omega." "Neither will sacrifice," I countered. "There's another way." I pointed to a narrow deer trail that cut across the ridge face rather than up it. "That path. It runs through a stand of blackthorn. Our scent will be masked long enough to reach the upper trail." Rowan hesitated, clearly torn between his plan and mine. Another howl, closer still, decided him. "Lead the way." We pushed through dense undergrowth, thorns catching at our clothes and skin. The path was barely visible, more animal instinct than human design. It curved around the ridge rather than over it, eventually joining a wider trail near the summit. By the time we emerged from the blackthorn, my arms were scratched and bleeding from dozens of tiny wounds. Rowan looked no better, but his expression remained focused, determined. "There," I said, pointing to a massive fallen pine ahead. "The entrance is behind it." As we approached the ancient tree, the sound of pursuit grew louder. They had lost our direct scent, but were still searching, still closing in. We wouldn't have much time once inside the tunnels. I ducked behind the fallen trunk, pushing aside decades of accumulated brush to reveal a dark opening in the rock face. Cool. Stale air wafted from the entrance, carrying the scent of damp stone and forgotten places. "It will be dark," I warned, glancing back at Rowan. "And narrow in some places." He nodded, eyes already shifting to that unnatural midnight blue that would see clearly in the darkness ahead. "After you, Alara of Northern Pine." With one last look at the forest I'd called home all my life, I stepped into the darkness of the tunnel, Rowan close behind me. The tunnel swallowed us in darkness, the light from the entrance quickly fading as we moved deeper inside. Damp, cool air pressed against my skin, carrying the musty scent of earth and stone. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter, though I knew better than to believe we were truly safe. "Stay close," I whispered, my voice unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. "There are drop-offs and side passages where it's easy to get lost." "I can see," Rowan replied, his voice equally hushed. In the dim light that filtered from the entrance, I could make out the faint glow of his eyes, now fully shifted to their wolf state. A predator's adaptation to darkness. I envied that ability as I fumbled in my pack for the small lantern I'd brought. My own partial shift gave me better night vision than a human, but nothing like a full werewolf's ability to navigate in near-total darkness. The lantern flared to life, casting eerie shadows against the rough-hewn walls of the tunnel. "This way," I said, holding the light aloft to illuminate a path that narrowed as it curved deeper into the ridge. We moved in tense silence, the only sounds our footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. The tunnel had been carved decades ago by human miners seeking silver, an irony not lost on me given Rowan's injuries. They'd abandoned the operation after finding the veins too small to be profitable, leaving behind a maze of passages that ran for miles beneath the Northern Territories. After perhaps 20 minutes, the tunnel forked. I paused, studying the diverging paths in the lantern light. "Left leads deeper into the mountain," I explained. "Right eventually emerges beyond pack territory, near the river valley." "Right then," Rowan decided, already moving toward that passage. I caught his arm. "Wait. It's not that simple. The right passage. There was a collapse the last time I came this way. Years ago. We might not be able to get through. And the left? Longer, more complex. Multiple branches. Some dead ends. But it also eventually leads out, to the north, rather than the east." Rowan considered this, his expression difficult to read in the shadowy light. "How far to the collapse?" "Another half hour, maybe. Then we go right until we can't anymore. If the passage is blocked, we'll backtrack." I nodded, and we continued down the right fork. The tunnel narrowed further, forcing us to walk single file in some places. Rowan insisted on taking the lead despite his injury, his broader frame shielding me from whatever might lie ahead. The protective gesture touched something within me. A soft, vulnerable place, long ignored. The air grew colder as we descended, the walls slick with moisture that caught the lantern light like scattered gems. Our progress slowed as the floor became more treacherous, littered with fallen rocks and debris from minor cave-ins over the years. "Alara," Rowan said suddenly, stopping so abruptly I nearly collided with his back. "Listen." I stilled, straining my ears. At first I heard nothing unusual, just the omnipresent dripping and our own breathing. Then, faintly, came the unmistakable sound of movement from the tunnel behind us. Not the scrabbling of small creatures that normally inhabited these spaces, but the deliberate progress of something larger. "They found the entrance," I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. "Extinguish the light," Rowan ordered softly. I hesitated. "But I can't see without—" "I can," he cut in. "Trust me, trust." Such a simple word, yet so foreign to someone who had learned early that trust was a luxury rarely afforded to those at the bottom of pack hierarchy. But looking at Rowan's face in the lantern's glow, I found I did trust him, against all reason. I snuffed the light, plunging us into total darkness. For a moment, panic clawed at my throat. Then Rowan's hand found mine, warm and solid and anchoring. "Stay close," he murmured, his breath brushing my ear in a way that sent shivers down my spine. "I won't let you fall." We moved forward in darkness, his hand guiding mine to his belt so I could hold on as he navigated. I focused on the feel of his movement, the subtle shifts of his body telegraphing each step, each turn. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit grew gradually clearer. At least 2 wolves following our trail through the tunnels. "They'll catch our scent," I whispered. "Even down here." "I'm counting on it," Rowan replied, something dangerous in his tone. "But we need to reach the collapse first." We pressed on, moving as quickly as the treacherous footing allowed. My world narrowed to the darkness. The feel of Rowan's body guiding mine, the steadily approaching sounds from behind. Time lost meaning in that lightless place. Minutes stretching like hours as we navigated the ancient passage. Then Rowan stopped again, so suddenly I bumped against him. "We're here," he said, and I didn't need light to hear the grimness in his voice. I fumbled with the lantern, relighting it to reveal what I already feared. The tunnel ahead was completely blocked by a massive rockfall. Chunks of ceiling and wall collapsed into an impassable barrier that extended from floor to ceiling. "No," I breathed, despair washing through me. "We're trapped." Rowan was already examining the blockage, running his hands over the rocks as if searching for a weakness. Is there any way around? A side passage we missed? I shook my head, forgetting momentarily that he couldn't see the gesture with his back to me. No. We have to go back to the fork. Take the left passage. There's no time, he said, turning to face me. In the lantern light, his expression was set in hard lines. They're too close. As if confirming his words, a howl echoed through the tunnel behind us. Much closer now. My heart raced, panic threatening to overwhelm rational thought. Rowan's hands came to rest on my shoulders, his touch steady and grounding. "Elara," he said, his voice low and intense. "Do you trust me?" I looked up into those midnight eyes, finding in them a certainty I desperately needed. "Yes," I whispered, surprising myself with how true it was. "Good. Because I need you to do exactly as I say." He took the lantern from my hands, placing it carefully on a nearby rock. "When they come, and they will, I want you to stand behind me. No matter what happens, no matter what you see or hear, stay behind me. Understood?" I nodded, fear and confusion warring within me. "What are you going to do?" A smile curved his lips, cold and predatory. "What I should have done from the beginning. Face them." "You can't fight them here," I protested, gesturing at the narrow space. "And your leg." "My leg is well enough for this," he interrupted. "And the confined space works to our advantage, not theirs. They can only come at us one at a time." Before I could argue further, the sound of claws against stone reached us. Closer. Much closer. Rowan positioned me against the wall of the tunnel, then placed himself between me and the approaching threat. His body tensed, poised for confrontation. "Remember," he said without looking back at me, "stay behind me. No matter what." The words had barely left his lips when two sets of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness beyond our lantern's reach. The wolves approached slowly, warily, sensing the trap of the dead end but unwilling to retreat without their prey. As they moved into the light, I recognized them both: Gregory, Nathaniel's second, and Vince, one of his most loyal enforcers. Gregory shifted first, his wolf form melting away to reveal the man, tall, lean, with the same cruel mouth as his cousin Nathaniel. "Well, well," he said, smirking as he straightened to his full height. "The little Omega has found herself astray." His eyes narrowed as they took in Rowan. A rather large stray. Vince remained in wolf form, a massive brown beast with bared teeth and hostile eyes. Together they blocked the tunnel completely. "Step aside," Rowan said, his voice calm but threaded with authority. "We mean no harm to your pack." Gregory laughed, the sound echoing unpleasantly off the stone walls. "No harm? You trespass on Northern Pine territory, hide from rightful pack authority, and claim no harm." His gaze shifted to me, hardening with contempt. "And you, Omega, harboring an outsider. Nathaniel will be disappointed." I shivered at the threat implicit in those words. Nathaniel's disappointment was something to be feared. "The girl had no choice," Rowan said, drawing Gregory's attention back to himself. "I compelled her assistance. Did you now?" Gregory's tone made it clear he didn't believe this. "Curious how willingly she runs with you then." Vince growled, taking a step forward. Rowan's posture shifted subtly, a coiling of muscle that reminded me forcibly of a predator preparing to strike. "Last chance," Rowan said, his voice dropping to something barely human. "Step aside." Gregory's smirk widened. "I don't think so. Nathaniel will want to meet the wolf who thought he could trespass on our lands." His gaze flicked to me again, and decide what to do with his accomplice. It happened so quickly I barely registered the movement. One moment Rowan was standing before me, tense but contained. The next, he had launched himself at Gregory with a speed that defied his injuries. Gregory, caught off guard by the suddenness of the attack, staggered backward into Vince. The three collided in a tangle of limbs and snarls, the confined space of the tunnel turning what might have been a coordinated fight into chaos. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering as I watched Rowan fight with a controlled savagery that stole my breath. Despite his injuries, he moved with lethal precision, his partially shifted form, not fully wolf but far from human, lending him both strength and agility that his opponents couldn't match. Gregory shifted mid-fight, his human form giving way to the gray wolf that had earned him his position as second. Now 2 wolves circled Rowan, looking for openings, for weakness. They found none. Every lunge was met with counterattack. Every snap of teeth evaded with almost contemptuous ease. When Vince leapt for Rowan's injured leg, Rowan somehow anticipated the move, spinning to catch the wolf midair and hurl him against the tunnel wall with such force that stone cracked beneath the impact. Vince slumped to the ground, dazed or unconscious. Gregory, seeing his advantage lost, hesitated, a fatal error. Rowan was on him in an instant, one hand gripping the wolf's throat with a strength that seemed impossible. Gregory struggled, claws raking at Rowan's arms and chest, opening bloody furrows that Rowan seemed not to notice. "Yield," Rowan growled, the word more animal than human. Gregory's response was to snap at Rowan's face, teeth barely missing flesh. Something cold and terrible washed over Rowan's features. His grip tightened, and Gregory's struggles became more desperate. "Stop!" I cried out, unable to watch anymore. "Rowan, please, don't kill him." For a heartbeat, I thought he hadn't heard me, or worse, had chosen to ignore my plea. Then slowly, his grip loosened. Gregory collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, his wolf form trembling with the effort of maintaining it. Rowan stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion, blood flowing freely from the wounds Gregory's claws had inflicted. When he spoke, his voice was rough, but controlled. "Tell your alpha that his time of unchallenged rule is over. The old ways are returning. The pack will be protected, all of the pack." Gregory's eyes, still wolf gold, glared up with hatred, and something else. Fear. Not of Rowan specifically, I realized, but of what he would have to tell Nathaniel, of returning with news of failure. "Go," Rowan commanded, stepping back to allow Gregory room to rise. "Take your friend and go. Consider your lives payment for what you would have done to her." He jerked his chin toward me. For a moment, I thought Gregory might attack again despite his clear defeat. Then something in Rowan's stance, some subtle shift that radiated lethal promise, seemed to decide him. He nudged Vince, who had begun to stir, and the 2 wolves slunk away, disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel. When they were gone, Rowan turned to me, his breathing still heavy, blood dripping from multiple wounds to pool on the stone floor. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern replacing the cold fury that had dominated his features moments before. I stared at him in wonder and confusion. "Am I? You're the one bleeding all over the place." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It looks worse than it is." He glanced at the collapsed tunnel behind us. "But we still need to find another way out." "Back to the fork," I said, moving to retrieve the lantern. "The left passage." He nodded, then swayed slightly, one hand reaching out to steady himself against the wall. The movement revealed the extent of his injuries, not just the fresh claw marks from Gregory, but the strain on his still healing leg, now trembling with the effort of supporting his weight. Without thinking, I moved to his side, ducking under his arm to support him. He stiffened for a moment, as if unused to accepting help, then gradually relaxed, allowing me to take some of his weight. "Thank you," he murmured, the words carrying a depth of meaning beyond simple gratitude. "We help each other," I replied simply. "It's what pack does, real pack." His arm tightened around my shoulders, and together we made our way back toward the fork in the tunnel, leaving behind blood and broken stone and something else I couldn't quite name. Something that had shifted irrevocably between us in that dark, enclosed space. The left passage proved more treacherous than the right, narrower in places, with uneven flooring that threatened to trip us at every step. Rowan leaned heavily on me as we navigated the winding tunnel, his breathing sometimes catching when a misstep jarred his injuries. Yet he never complained, never suggested we stop, even when I could feel the warm wetness of fresh blood seeping through his shirt, where Gregory's claws had torn deepest. "You should let me bandage those wounds," I said, as we paused at another branching of the tunnel. "The bleeding hasn't stopped." "Later," he replied, straightening with visible effort. "When we're clear of Northern Pine territory." I studied his face in the lantern light, noting the tightness around his eyes that betrayed his pain. You won't be much use to anyone if you bleed to death before we get there. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Your concern is touching, little Omega, but I've survived worse. Stop calling me that, I said suddenly, the words escaping before I could consider them. His eyebrows rose slightly. Calling you what? Little Omega. I met his gaze steadily. You fought for me back there. You're bleeding because of me. I think we're past pack titles, don't you? Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, followed by a warmth that made my heart skip. Ilara, then, he said softly, as if tasting my name. Which way? I indicated the left fork, and we continued our slow progress through the tunnel system. Time lost meaning in that enclosed space, with no sunlight to mark its passage. My shoulders ached from supporting Rowan's weight. My legs trembled with fatigue, yet something kept me moving forward, a determination born not just of survival instinct, but of the growing certainty that whatever waited at the end of this journey would change everything. Eventually, the air around us changed, growing fresher, carrying scents of pine and open sky rather than damp stone. We're close, I said, hope lending strength to my tired limbs. The northern exit can't be far. Rowan nodded, his midnight eyes scanning the tunnel ahead. And what awaits us there? Wilderness, I replied. The northern territories are largely unclaimed, too rugged for most packs to bother with. We'll be outside Nathaniel's reach at least. For now, he murmured, something dark crossing his features. He won't forget this challenge, or forgive it. The truth of his words settled heavily between us. There would be no returning to my cabin, to the life I'd carefully constructed on the margins of pack society. By helping Rowan, by fleeing with him, I had burned that bridge completely. I knew the cost when I made my choice, I said quietly. I don't regret it. His eyes found mine in the dimness, searching for something. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded once before turning back to the path ahead. The tunnel began to slope upward, the ceiling gradually lowering until we were forced to duck our heads. Then, finally, I saw it. A faint grayish light ahead that could only be the exit. Renewed energy surged through me as we quickened our pace toward freedom. The exit was smaller than the entrance had been. Little more than a jagged hole in the rocky hillside, partially concealed by scrubby brush. We emerged into late afternoon sunlight that seemed blindingly bright after hours in the tunnels. The air was crisp with early winter chill, carrying the promise of snow on the wind that swept down from the higher peaks beyond. We stood on a steep hillside overlooking a vast, wild valley. Thick forest spread below us, unbroken except for the silver ribbon of a river winding through its heart. In the far distance, mountains rose blue and hazy against the horizon, the border of the Eastern Territories. Rowan's home. We made it, I breathed, the enormity of what we'd done finally hitting me. I was truly beyond pack boundaries now, in land I'd never walked before. Rowan straightened beside me, no longer leaning on my support. Even wounded and exhausted, he cut an imposing figure against the landscape, his broad shoulders set with a determination that seemed to challenge the wilderness itself. Come, he said, gesturing toward a stand of pines that would offer some shelter. Night will fall soon, and we need to tend these wounds before continuing. We made our way carefully down the steep slope to the trees. Within their shelter, I helped Rowan ease to the ground, his back against a broad trunk, then began unpacking what few medical supplies I'd managed to bring. Take off your shirt, I instructed, businesslike despite the flush that threatened to rise in my cheeks. He complied without comment, revealing the full extent of his injuries. Gregory's claws had left 4 deep furrows across his chest and several more along his arms. Already, though, I could see his accelerated healing at work. The wounds were clean-edged, showing early signs of closing even without intervention. Your healing ability is remarkable, I said, carefully cleaning the wounds with water from our canteen. I've never seen anything like it. A trait of my bloodline, he replied, watching my ministrations with those intense midnight eyes. I applied a salve of yarrow and comfrey to the deepest cuts, then wrapped his chest with bandages from my pack. Throughout my work, he remained silent, though his gaze never left my face, studying me with an interest that made my hands less steady than they should have been. There, I said finally, sitting back on my heels. That should help until your body does the rest." "Thank you," he said, the simple words carrying a weight of sincerity that warmed me more than they should have. I busied myself building a small, sheltered fire as the light began to fade from the sky. When it was crackling softly, casting flickering shadows among the pines, I settled across from Rowan, the flames between us. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the events of the day settling around us like fallen leaves. "What happens now?" I finally asked, giving voice to the question that had haunted me since our escape from the tunnels. Rowan's gaze lifted from the fire to meet mine. "Now you have a choice to make." "A choice?" He nodded, his expression serious. "I return to the east, to finish what I started. You can come with me, or—" he hesitated, something vulnerable flashing briefly in his eyes. "Or I can ensure you're settled safely elsewhere, away from Nathaniel's reach." The offer stunned me. After everything we'd been through, the idea of parting ways had never occurred to me. Yet here he was, offering me freedom to choose my own path, even if it led away from him. "Why would I go to the east?" I asked, needing to understand what he was really offering. Rowan was silent for a long moment, his eyes returning to the dancing flames. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but firm. "Because I am not merely from the Eastern Territories, Alara. I am their ruler, the Alpha King." Though I had suspected, had seen evidence of his unusual power, his commanding presence. Hearing the confirmation still sent a jolt through me. The wounded wolf I'd pulled from the river, whom I'd sheltered and argued with, and supported through darkened tunnels, was the near-mythical ruler of all Eastern packs. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "At first, caution," he admitted. "I was wounded, vulnerable, in unknown territory. Then—" He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Then I discovered something rare. Someone who saw me as simply Rowan. Not a king, not an alpha, just a wolf who needed help. It was refreshing." I considered this, turning his words over in my mind. And now? What would I be in the East? Another subject bowing before the Alpha King? Something flared in his eyes, a heat that had nothing to do with the fire between us. "No, never that." "Then what?" I pressed, needing to hear him say it. Rowan moved then, coming around the fire to kneel before me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, could breathe in his scent. Pine and wild places and something uniquely him. "Come to the East as my equal," he said, his voice low and intense. "As my partner, my queen." The words hung in the air between us, charged with meaning. My heart pounded against my ribs, my mind struggling to process what he was offering. "We barely know each other," I said, though the words sounded hollow even to my ears. In the space of 2 days, Rowan had seen more of my true self than my pack had in a lifetime. "I know enough," he countered. "I know you have courage that shames many warriors. I know you have compassion that extends even to enemies. I know you have a healer's hands and a wolf's heart, even if your body won't complete the shift." His own hand lifted, hovering near my face as if seeking permission to touch. "And I know that from the moment you dragged me from that river, something inside me recognized you, as if the moon herself had guided me to your shores." My grandmother's pendant seemed suddenly heavy against my chest, her words echoing in my memory. "The moon embraces all her children." Perhaps this was what she had meant, that my path would lead not to acceptance within my birth pack, but to something far beyond it. I reached up, capturing Rowan's hovering hand and pressing it to my cheek. His touch was warm, gentle despite the strength I knew it contained. "The East is far," I whispered, searching his midnight eyes. "We have time," he replied, his thumb tracing the curve of my cheekbone. "And the journey will be easier together." In that moment, surrounded by the growing darkness of a wilderness night, I made my choice. Leaning forward, I pressed my lips to his, a gesture as ancient as the moon above us, and as new as the path stretching before us. When we parted, his eyes held mine with an intensity that took my breath away. "Is that a yes, Alara of Northern Pine?" I smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in my life. "It's a yes, Rowan of the East. I will come with you. Not as a subject, not as an Omega, but as myself, as your equal." His answering smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines of authority into something joyful and unburdened. As night settled fully around us, we remained by the fire, planning our journey east, toward a future neither of us could have imagined when fate brought a wounded wolf to my river and changed both our lives forever. In that moment, I understood what my grandmother had truly meant. My inability to fully shift wasn't a weakness, but a different kind of strength. It had kept me separate, had taught me to see with different eyes, had prepared me for this unexpected path. The moon had indeed embraced me, her half-shifted child, had guided me to waters where a king would fall, so that both of us might rise together.